Thank you so much for joining me in another video. So as you can tell based on the title, well, today we are talking about Tory Burch. Now, Tory Burch has never really been a brand that I would talk about much on my channel or do a whole dedicated video, frankly, but here we are. To me, Tory Burch has always been a very nice sort of contemporary department store heavy brand. I always felt it was for that everyday woman that wanted to perhaps get a nice handbag or a nice pair of shoes, but she didn't necessarily want to spend Chanel money or Dior money. Yet you could tell there was perhaps an influence of that there with the brand, but it never felt like a dupe. There always was this signature Tory Burch boho Americana theme around the brand. It was always a very nice, safe brand. And I vividly remember, I'm definitely dating myself, I want to say 15 years ago, 2008, I sold Tory Burch at a store I worked at as a sales associate. Whenever I think of Tory Burch, I will always forever have these ingrained in my mind. And I'm talking about these ballet flats, the logo with the elasticated back. They were kind of that shoe of the mid to late 2000s. If you remember that time period, it was kind of like when Tory Burch you would see on a lot of celebrities. It was always this nice brand, but it was never really super fashion forward. It always stayed in its sort of lane of that nice boho Americana. To me, whenever I think of Tory Burch, I always think of those girls of that time period of the late 2000s, the Lauren Conrad, Girls on the Hills, even like a Hilary Duff or a Paris Hilton, that kind of era. Back in the day, I actually had two handbags. I had like a tote that I used as like a work bag I gave to one of my younger sisters and had a little mini bag. To me, Tory Burch always stayed in its lane. It always kind of had this customer base. It kind of seemed like a good formula for a brand, this more attainable, approachable price point. It wasn't quite Chanel, but it wasn't fast fashion. But I have been noticing at Tory Burch, there has been a bit of a change, and I would say a very welcome change from what I used to associate Tory Burch with, like a Lauren Conrad, that kind of boho American aesthetic, to actually something very different, but something that I think her customer base could benefit from. And I first really took notice of this change when I saw these shoes, and maybe you saw these as well, but these pierced mules had a bit of a viral moment on TikTok. Honestly, if you showed me these shoes, I would have been like, oh yeah, that looks like it could be like a Dries Van Noten or even an old Celine or Prada, something along those lines. If you told me they were any of those brands, I would have believed you. But if you told me they were Tory Burch without me knowing they were Tory Burch, I would have been totally shocked. But I think there's been this gradual rebrand that's been going on these past couple years. And I read a Washington Post article and it referenced how often Tory Burch was called by the kids on TikTok, which is kind of hilarious to me, Cheugy. And if you're not familiar with this word, for me, I feel like as a millennial, sometimes going on TikTok, it's just a reminder I am definitely not young anymore, and that's okay. But the word Cheugy basically is a way for Gen Z to tell us millennials the things that we liked in specifically the 2010s are very out of style. I've seen TikToks where people talk about skinny jeans to leggings to pumpkin spice lattes to like Gucci. All the things that we liked in the 2010s are basically not cool anymore. And I think a lot of this also coincides with what the core Tory Burch customer has been perceived as. Myself included, I think the Tory Burch customer is probably someone that drinks Starbucks, probably enjoys pumpkin spice latte. Personally, as a millennial, I am very triggered by this term. This is what happens as you get old, apparently. But anyways, that's not what this video is about. But back to Tory Burch with this latest spring-summer 2024 collection. I think to me, when I really realized this is not this like Cheugy brand or like what commonly associated Tory Burch to be in the 2000s to even 2010s. But if we look at this latest collection, first of all, the setting is kind of like, whoa, totally different. It's staged at the Natural History Museum, the Gilder Center, which was recently designed by architect Studio Gang, really sets the tone for this collection. And you really get the feeling that you're kind of in the future or on another planet. And Vogue makes reference to Pierre Cardin's holiday home, the Bubble Palace, which is totally accurate in terms of architecture, but I definitely think there's a fashion connection with this collection. And with this first look, this kind of biomorphic shape of this space we are seeing reflected, interestingly enough, with this handbag. This biomorphic shape kind of reminds me of La Mer's egg bag or the vintage Chanel Millennium bag. This to me does not seem like your typical Tory Burch bag. This biomorphic clutch, very unusual. We also saw with this collection this minimal lady top handle bag, very like 1960s. And we also saw these mesh layer bags. And I think this theme of the 60s is obviously felt throughout the whole collection. When we look at the ready-to-wear, there's this 60s retro futurism. We're seeing cooler neutral tones, we're seeing gray tones, and then these kind of space-age rimmed dresses with these rings around them. We're seeing silver hardware. One thing that I think is very interesting about Tory Burch's recent change, and I think a part of her brand's evolution, is her discovery of the work of Claire McCardell. This from another magazine. Tory Burch, when talking about Claire McCardell, she was such an innovator and completely broke the mold. She went against everything that was happening, and it goes without saying that American sportswear is the way it is because of her. Tory Burch's summer 2022 collection, she actually dedicated the whole collection to Claire McCardell, and she's also set up a Tory Burch Claire McCardell Fashion Fellowship at the Maryland Center for History and Culture. Just in terms of who Claire McCardell is, she's a designer that really gained prominence in the 40s and 50s for her innovative designs that prioritize simplicity, functionality, and comfort. She introduced the concept of the American look, which emphasized practicality and ease of movement in clothing. We see some of her most notable contributions in the use of denim, wraparound skirts, and the creation of the iconic pop-over dress. One of her most famous designs is the monastic dress, which featured a very simple silhouette with a belted waist, and it became a symbol of her design philosophy. Claire McCardell's work really did lay the foundation for modern casual wear and has really had a lasting impact on American fashion. And you can definitely see the influence of Claire McCardell's work with this collection. A lot of this collection in principle is very wearable, functional, and comfortable. Sure, there are some of those playful ringed dresses and skirts, but when you look at a lot of this collection, so much of it is in essence very Claire McCardell. Again, with the shoes, we're seeing it looks like sandal versions of the pierced mules, and then these sunglasses we were seeing throughout the collection, they felt very Prada, futuristic. And I recently made a video where I was talking about Gen X Soft Club, so it's kind of this design style. While I don't think this is totally that, I definitely think there are some crossovers with that aesthetic. So yeah, when I saw this collection, I was very pleasantly surprised. And one of the things that has always been appealing to many people is that it's accessible, it's approachable. This brand definitely does fulfill a market need, but I also think many brands, they often change, or they may try to forget about their customer base and try to specifically appeal to a younger demographic. But I definitely think she's taking her customer base and giving them a new vision. And while this is actually a very different aesthetic, there is definitely a change, and I definitely can see how younger generations, the kids on TikTok were the ones that were talking about the pierced mule. They are definitely making appeals to that customer base, but in a way that I think is very appealing to its existing demographic. While I think the core customer base may not necessarily want to wear some of the very avant-garde Dries Van Noten collections, this to me is kind of that midway point, and as well as price point. It's not going to be as expensive as Prada or like an old Celine, right? A lot of what she's bringing to the table is something that is very wearable for that traditional customer base, but it's less cheugy. So yes, that's my video, and honestly, when I look at this collection, there's like actually a few things I'm kind of curious about. Considering Tory Burch, it's not going to be too expensive. I would love to see when it is available spring summer 2024. I think this rebrand is very welcome, and I'm excited to see where this brand goes. Thank you so much for joining me in another one, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.